And now we're into the actual FAFSA form. There's actually 7 sections in the FAFSA. There's student demographics, school selection, which is where you enter information about both your high school and the colleges that you plan on sending the FAFSA to, dependency status, parent demographics, this is about you, the parents in the audience, parent financials, student financials, and then the signature and submission portion. So some of this information is already going to be pre-filled from your account creation, as well as that initial information that you submitted to get into the FAFSA. So you've got your student's social security number, their first name, their last name, and their date of birth. That's already going to be pre-filled. You can obviously just double check that, but that's already going to be pre-filled. The next thing you're going to go through is enter in student email and telephone number. One thing you'll know is that if you leave the email address blank, then your student is not going to get emails about the FAFSA form. So if you want your student to be involved in the process of knowing what's happening with the FAFSA, you do need to enter in your student's contact information there. If you prefer to just handle things yourself, then you don't have to enter their email address and telephone number. And as I mentioned earlier, the your here is actually referencing your student, your child, not you. So it's a little tricky sometimes. You got to be careful. Just make sure you're entering the correct information in when it asks for your, because that's referencing the student. And I've seen folks make that mistake before, which is why I'm harping on it so much when they're a parent filling out the FAFSA for their student. Okay. So once you have that information, next up comes the student's address, the permanent mailing address, and all the obviously associated information. And this is actually a required field. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill it out. This is an old house address I had several years ago. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this out real quick. Great. So that is the permanent mailing address. This is a required field, so it is important to make sure you fill that one out. The next sort of element that comes up is the student's residency and eligibility. Now, this isn't going to necessarily matter as much for federal financial aid, but it does often impact how certain colleges apply state-level financial aid programs, because there's some states that use the FAFSA to judge the financial aid, to administer in-state financial aid programs. So the first thing it's going to ask is about your home state, whether you've lived in Texas for at least 5 years. The answer could be yes, the answer could be no. If the answer is no, then if Texas is you have to answer a few more questions, like your current legal residence, and then when you became a legal resident of Texas. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to go ahead and say that we've been a resident of Texas for at least 5 years. I'm currently in Massachusetts, so that's not technically true, but we'll make do. And then the bigger question is whether you are a U.S. citizen. Your options for this question are yes, you're a U.S. citizen, no, but you're an eligible non-citizen, or no, you're neither a citizen nor an eligible non-citizen. If you click this option, you're not able to fill out the FAFSA because you're not going to qualify for federal financial aid or financial aid, frankly, at most institutions. So you just pick whichever one is applicable to you and then move on to the next question. Sorry. The next section here gets into your student's educational status. So the first question is when they begin college in the 2022-23 school year. So you can see this is still the form for last cycle. It's going to flip over on October 1st, which is the point at which you can start to fill out the FAFSA for this cycle. In your case, this question will ask, what will your student's high school completion status be when they begin college in the 2023-2024 school year? But again, pretty straightforward. So you just select, for most of you, it's going to be high school diploma or a GED or homeschooled, but really for most of you, it's going to be high school diploma. It's just a question around what their high school completion status is. Pretty straightforward. Then you obviously also want to enter what college degree or certificate they'll be working towards when they begin the 2023 school year. Again, for most of you in the audience tonight, it's going to be first bachelor's degree. Pretty straightforward. And then finally, there are some questions about whether your student has gone to college before. So first, will they have their first bachelor's degree when they begin the 2022-23 school year? Yes or no? And then the college grade level, which again is pretty straightforward. For most of you, it's going to be never attended college / first year. Otherwise, you pick the correct answer accordingly. For some of you, it might end up being community college as well, which would also be encompassed under first year, but you would be choosing associate degree for community colleges. All right, and then the last question here is actually probably the first really important question that we've seen on this page. Everything so far has been kind of boilerplate. This is actually the first really important question that we're going to see here. So the question is, are you interested in being considered for work study? So work study is basically a program of financial aid that gives you an on-campus job at whatever institution you end up attending. But the job itself is actually paid for through federal financial aid dollars. So it's administered by the college that you end up enrolling in, but it's actually federal financial aid. And so if you want to be considered for work study, you do want to select yes here, but it is really important that you make that election here, because otherwise, even if a college does offer work study, not all the colleges have a robust work study program, but if a college offers it, you want to make sure that you get considered. So you definitely want to click yes in response to this question. The last question you'll get is about student selective service here. So that is whether, the first question is obviously about a student's sex assigned at birth, so that's male or female, and not gender. I don't think the federal student aid has caught up in terms of inclusivity yet, but basically the reason they ask this question is that if you do select that you are male, it's going to ask if you're registered for the selective service system, which is the military draft. And you are usually required, if you're between the ages of 18 and 25 and male, to be registered for the draft. And so you have to say yes or no to that. If the answer is no, you also use the FAFSA to auto register you with selective for the draft, basically. But there's no like upside or downside to this in the context of financial aid. It just makes your life easier because as a male, you are required to have registered for the draft. But pretty straightforward. So you can just answer that however you'd like. All right. And the last thing it'll ask is about your student's driver's license, if they have one. If they don't, you can just leave this blank. And then the next thing they'll ask about is foster care and parent educational completion. One sort of meta level point to keep in mind as you're sort of thinking through the FAFSA is just making sure what your student has answered for various questions that overlap on the Common App or on other college applications. The reason for this is, in particular, let's take a look at this question here, which is around the highest level of school completed by parent number 1 or parent number 2. So depending on what the student answers here, this could affect whether a college views your student as a first-gen student, for example, right? Essentially, like if you as a parent have already attended college, then you're usually not considered first-gen by colleges. Sorry, your student's not considered first-gen by colleges. Whereas if you as a parent have never completed college, you've just attended high school or graduated from high school or didn't even necessarily graduate from high school and get your GED, then your child is going to be considered a first-gen student. So the broader point is you want to make sure that any information you're entering in on the FAFSA is aligned with the information that you enter on the Common App. For the most part, if there's like minor inconsistencies, it's not going to be the end of the world, but it can sometimes trip you up, especially when you look at selective colleges. So you just don't want to be in a position where you're having to defend an inconsistency. So just make sure that whatever information your student enters on the Common App, you want to make sure that information is aligned with whatever you are answering within the FAFSA. So you go in and answer, there's first a question about foster care or being part of the foster youth system. So it's just simple yes, no. And then the level of schooling completed by the mother or father, and then the level of schooling completed by the other parent. So you just enter that information in accordingly. Okay, so that is the student demographics section.